Okay, this is a continuation of ERWA Directed Exercise 10 Event Rule Variables. I just want to talk about where we are right now. We're on about, if you're following in the directed exercise document, we're about at the end of page 127, right at the beginning of page 128, where it says, and it's asking us to insert a constant field into the level break footer to the left of total. So I'm going to highlight the level break footer, and I'm going to grab a constant, put it in right here, and it says to change the name to total for voucher. So I've done that. But as a side note, when I go to look at the report output, I don't really see where it's displaying the total for voucher. So that's going to be something that doesn't quite match the sample outputs that you can look at. Okay. Next, we're going to change, insert a single line. Let's see, on the advanced tab, set it as global variable. We've already made it. Insert an alpha variable to the level break footer section to the right of GL amount and lined up under the blank columns. Okay. I did this earlier, so I'm going to delete that. I'm going to show you I'm going to add an alpha variable to the right here of the GL amount variable and lined up under this table here. So what we're going to do is, in the data processing, we have, well, let me just go to that data processing. I can go to processing options. Just to remind us, we have a display option where if it's a 1, we're going to do comments. If it's a 2, we're going to do media object column. So on this section, we're going to have ER in here to label this either comments or media objects. And so this is where the actual output is going to display down here. And so I've added the alpha variable, and I'm going to change it to just say variable. Okay. Now we're going to add text variables. And since the header, the parent section here, is what's going to contain comments, I'm going to delete this because I did this earlier and did it wrong. I'm going to add comments, and I'm going to add media objects and say add, click OK, go back in to make sure they're find comments and media objects. Okay. And then, so those are we're gonna use ER to set the labels for that. Then down here in the level break footer, we're gonna add another text variable. And that variable is going to be asterisk, asterisk, voucher not in balance, asterisk, asterisk, and say add and okay. Go back in to make sure it's stuck. It did. I'm going to save that. Okay. So now we're going to, let's go back up to the parent and start adding some work on event rules. So I'm going to go on the event rules. And I am going to create an event rule variable. That's this variable right here. And under the, I want it to be associated with a data dictionary item called EXA, because it's going to govern how it displays and all this. Now, EXA, we're going to rename that as media object. But before you leave, I am going to attach my specifics to it. I'm going to make it a report variable. If you stay here a second, I'm going to jump out and say, oh, that's a character, that's a string type. So I'm going to go back in and edit this so that it's SZ for zero terminated string, and say finish. So now we're going to do the event rules necessary to load a media object. And let me talk about what media objects are. In Data Dictionary, we have different types of data dictionary items. And TXFT is one of those, which is called a generic text blob buffer. So it's a binary large object. Okay, and so that's a type 18. We're used to dealing with the character type, the date type. Sometimes we deal with integer. We deal with string a lot, and we deal with numeric a lot. These others, you will eventually get to them. They're a little different, like integer is different than numeric, because numeric can be, you know, have tenths and hundredths and thousands associated with it. So a decimal point. So, but we're dealing with, in this case, with a binary large object. And so because it's stored specially, we have to retrieve it specially. So now that I've created the variable, I'm going to go to the do section, and I'm going to start right down here. And so if we go to the system function button, which is this button right here, and then go down to media objects, and then we need to find the media object GT, stands for generic text, 0411S. GT 0411S. And I'm going to highlight it, or I can double click it, or I can highlight it and hit the OK button. So let's actually double click it. Okay. And so for the action, we're going to get text. I double click it, it pops it into the value here. And then for the text, we're going to grab that variable, the media object, the variable we created, which is media object exa. And then these 4 fields are the parameter associated, the primary keys associated with the table that uniquely stores the data. So I'm going to highlight company key, and I'm going to type in BC document company, which is the KCO. Double click it, highlight document type, which is we're gonna scroll down to document type will be DCT. And notice even here, it shows that it's associated with the FO411, which is reassuring. Of course, the voucher invoice number will be document voucher. It should be a DOC. There you go. And then the document pay item, which will probably be right there under pay item SFX. So now I have linked it to the information. I'm going to say OK. And you can see that it shows all the mappings that we assigned to that. And I'm going to go and add a comment, an empty comment after it, just to separate it. And I might put comments in here to explain what I'm doing later on. But for now, I just want to get this in because this is already going to be a lengthy YouTube video over several things. So event rules for headings in the parental section will be what we work on next. Okay, so now we are going to add the logic up in the initialize section that says basically if we're displaying comments, I want to change the header. If I'm displaying media object, I want to set the header. Otherwise, I probably want to hide it. So here, let's go do that. So I'm going to now, just as a reminder, in the directed exercise, it'll talk about using the PO variables or processing option variables, where if you remember last time, instead of I gave you a reason why I don't like using the PO variables, but I'll use VA variables. So we're going to use the VA variables here. And so we're going to say if the VA variable PO display is equal to a literal value of 1, then, and I'm going to highlight this top row, then I'm going to say the RC variable heading. Let's see, if I click in here and type R again, RC, there's variable heading. I'm going to say RC variable heading equals one of those text variables. So I'm going to type in text variable equals comments. And then I am going to, inside this else, which means it's not a 1, then I'm going to test to see if it's a 2, but it's going to use the same logic as this. So I'm just going to copy this whole thing. And then right after the else, I'm going to paste it in there. It's easier this way. And I'm going to say if the variable is equal to a literal of 2, then I'm going to set the variable heading to the other value, which is media objects, and say, okay. And then I'm going to say, else I want to hide the RC variable heading. So I can do that by going to system functions and object. I want to hide an object, which is that RC variable heading. Got to pass it into there. So I could double click it. I can highlight it and hit that either way and say, okay. All right. So just for grins, I'm going to do this where I'm going to say logic for displaying label header comment slash media object. Just so I know what this section is, I'm going to at the bottom add a comment just to separate it. So now I have a description of that. All right. Going to save and exit and save the entire thing. Actually, I've had a quick change of heart. You know, I added that logic, but I wanted to actually, I'm gonna add another comment here that matches the header in the directed exercise. And it said, the title is Event Rules for Headings in the Parent Section. So I know exactly where I was on this. Okay, so save. And now I'm going to do event rules in the level break footer section. And in the do event, because right as it's just retrieved data, then I wanted to do this stuff. So I'm going to start with a blank comment. In fact, I'm going to make a couple of them just, and then I'm going to put in event rules for variable in level break footer section. Okay, and so right after that, give a little space, and I'm going to go if, and I'm not going to use the PO variable, I'm going to use the VO display variable, if it's equal to 1, now we have to also remember there was a comment there if the amounts didn't match, so I have to test that as well. So I'm going to say, and the RV total gross. Now we called it the total voucher amount is not equal to the RV total GL amount. And I'm going to say okay. And re-highlight up this because I'm going to add some logic in right after the if and before the else. I'm going to say the MX equals the RV variable equals the one of the text fields, or I only did one text field that said voucher is not in balance. But then I'm going to go else. And since the PO display, I'm going to do else if the PO display is equal to 2, which means media objects. Then I'm going to say that RV variable that field that we're going to populate is equal to the VA media object. Okay. And if you remember, we went and did the media object retrieval from the special table up in the header section. So now that I have it, now if it's not equal to 2, I'm just going to say that RV variable is null, so I'm going to leave it null and say okay, so that it doesn't display anything. And I'm going to save and save. Now it's talking about in the child section, the subsection join here. It wants me to add a logic that sets the total GL amount. Is that just the value? That's just GL amount, but it's setting the total GL amount to 0 every time this is called. And since we already we had to do this logic in here, it's actually already working. So we're not going to change anything except I'm willing to in the, yeah, I'm not sure right now. Seems to be working right now, so I'm not going to change that. Okay, since we've got that all figured out, I'm going to go, I've saved everything. So now I'm going to try running it. If I go back to the report, design area, design tab, go to version list. I'm going to make this display our preferences. I like the exit bar over here. So with this highlighted, I'm going to look at the processing options. Address number 4344, and I'm going to leave it blank first. So I'm going to submit that and see how the output. And that's this third one. Notice there's no columns over here. Okay. I'm going to run it again. Only this time I'm going to change the display to 1 and run it. And notice how I have comments up here, but my header didn't come out, so I don't know what's going on with that. But at least the voucher not in balance here when these two columns don't match is working. So I need to go figure that out real quick. So let me go do that. I think I know the problem. So I figured out the problem, and I find it interesting. So I have gone in here and I cleared out the column headings and said, okay, saved it. And I had never seen this before. So I go to run this, and it gives me no change in the header. So I'm going to delete that. No change. It doesn't say comments or anything. I'm going to go back in. Oops. I'm going to go back in here, and the top, well, what was, if I'm going to add another constant. So this says constant usually, and I didn't bother put anything in the column heading 2. But when there's a value in there, then I believe the engine knows how to reach out to that label. If there's nothing in there and the value's null, it doesn't know how to update it. So our logic is good when there's at least something in this label. So I'm going to save it, go to versions, double click, submit, okay. And when I do that, you'll see here that comments now populates. Now this was always showing up. I just never scrolled down before, but here's the voucher not in balance is that comment we put in there. And so now I can continue with if I change the processing options to display 2, I'm going to save that, select submit, okay. And now it says media object, looks like it's truncating that. But so now I have media objects for some of these fields. That's probably the only 2 I have. So media objects for those. But I find it interesting that it truncated it. And so we're going to try and figure out why that is real quick. I am going to just make this label larger just to see what happens. See if this is some sort of style where it's maxing out on how much you can populate in there. I've saved it. Submit. So it now displays the whole amount. So it looks like that if I were to play with that, and I encourage you guys to do this too, is if I then change this to, I'm going to guess it was just that long of a column heading. Save. I think this will still be a full column. I mean, it won't truncate that media objects. No, but hopefully if I delete one more, and I might have to do this a couple times. But I'm going to start getting truncation on this output. And yes, so you can see here, there's media object, and this one was media objects. So it started truncating. Now let me look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the space, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Media objects is 13. So that it looks like there might be a relationship between the 13 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it looks like there's a size 3 larger than this heading. So if I only wanted to truncate it to the 4, I might just use a column heading of size 1. Let's see if this works. I know this is really crazy that I'm going through this, but when you figure out things like this on how the engine works, even though there's no documentation for it, this should be 4 characters then, or looks like 3 characters. So 1 goes to 3. So that's real interesting. So now I can go back here and just put in a bunch of column headings, save, and it will no longer truncate. So I never knew that before. So it's nice to know that's there. And so now it's no longer truncated. So I'm going to delete all of these. Out of reports. There we go. So now we're back to normal. So I always find it fascinating when I learn more about the engine, what's going on behind the scenes, and I'm pretty positive there's no documentation on that fact. So it's always good to come across these things and find the solution, because then you'll be able to, if you ever see it again, you'll be able to know what the issue was. And it was because we originally deleted the column heading down to 0. And so it didn't give us anything. When we made it 1 character, it gave us 3. And so it was truncating. And now that we just fill it up with a bunch of I don't care stuff, it now doesn't truncate that header at all. It allows the max amount. So there we go. We're done with that. You guys should then go ahead and do the exercise, creating an event rule using advanced system functions, and creating an event rule using system functions. And all the exercises in between. Have fun, guys.